I really didn't want to go into B-52s. So that's when I asked to go into the U-2s. And
were there a lot of other pilots that were trying to get in?
not one.
Why? You'd think it'd be a choice assignment.
It would, but they didn't know about it.
Well, how did Johnny Rusma find out about it?
He saw this magazine.
What, some Air Force magazine? And
Yeah, they weren't recruiting. He just said maybe this is something you could look into. You'd be interested in.
what,
And so I knew that they were flying a U-2s just down the Rio Grande River down in Del Rio. And so my boss was a full colonel, and he was an old SAC man. He was an old bomber guy, I mean, from the word go, from World War II days. And he was constantly after me to go back on SAC combat crew duty. And so when I got this information from Johnny, I said, bingo. And so I said, Colonel Manso, you always wanted me to go back to SAC combat crew duty. How about if I go into the SAC combat crew duty in U-2s? He said, well, I think that'd be marvelous. Why don't you take a T-bird and fly down to Del Rio and see my old friend Bill, what the hell's his name? Can't remember right now. He says, I'll tell him you're coming. Wow, boy, that just knocked my socks off. And so I fired up U-2 and went down there and...
I fired a T-bird.
Yeah, fired up the T-bird, went down there and met all these guys. A squadron commander met the airplane and the ops officer and the flight surgeon and got on a bunch of people. And so did my interview with them and flew on back to El Paso that afternoon. And it wasn't but a couple days later I got the information that, yeah, come join us. And so I got orders from SAC transferring me from El Paso to Del Rio, to Laughlin Air Force Base in Del Rio. And so I went down there and started my checkout process. First thing was to go to a Brazier factory in Massachusetts that made the pressure suit. So everybody, you had to wear a pressure suit if you fly in the U-2 at high altitude. You could fly it around the traffic pattern and street clothes if you wanted to. But if you go to fly it at altitude, you had to have a pressure suit. Absolutely had to. So they fitted everybody for a pressure suit, and I flew up there and got my fitting and got my suit, and then I started my checkout and checked out right there at Laughlin Air Force Base.
So how long did it take you to train to fly the U-2?
Oh, I don't know, probably maybe half a dozen day flights, a couple of night flights, and you're off and running. We had a lot of, we had training missions, and they draw a line on the map and go through all these towns and airports and air bases and so forth, and you had the cameras running the whole time. And then when you get back, your instructor, which didn't ride with you, but he would check all the stuff, all your paperwork and everything when you got back, and would evaluate your track over these targets and all that. And if there's any problem, work it out with him. But it's pretty easy, actually. Yeah, actually I flew it about 7 years. So, it was early 60 to late 67.
Mm-hmm.
Like that.
How did you feel about stopping?
About stopping?
Yeah, you had to quit flying the U-2.
Well, there was a problem there of us running out of airplanes. That's the reason I left. We were down to, I think, 6 airplanes because the Chinese had picked up, the nationalist Chinese had picked up a lot of our reconnaissance missions over mainland China. And the mainland Chinese had gotten very proficient at shooting down airplanes. And so every time they get one shot down, they would take the replacement for it out of our squadron. And the next thing I knew, I was looking at half a dozen airplanes, you know, in a squadron that would normally have 18 or 20. And so the flying time was getting shorter and less and less. And so I said, well, look, this thing isn't going anywhere. So a friend of mine, Dave Ray, had applied for attaché duty and got it. So, well, maybe I could do that too. So I applied for attaché duty and I got it. And then we ended up in the Congo about a year after that. You know, we were in school in Washington for a year. Intelligence school for a half a year and language training for a half a year.
Let's back up for a second. Do you remember the pilots that you used to train? There was a couple of pilots, and one of them was named Bing?
Yeah, Bing and Billy. I ran across some of those years later when I was in Vietnam.
Who were they, first of all?
They were nationalist Chinese.
And where were they? They were, what year was that? 60, it was, I'm guessing it was about 65 or 67. Because I remember them very well. They were very nice to me.
Yeah. Oh, they were nice guys. Great guys.
They came over to the house.
Yeah. Yeah, they came over the house several times. We'd usually fix them some, one of your mom's big dinners.
And they made like a banana dessert and...
Yeah. Yeah. They're a great bunch.
Yeah.
But years later, after I checked some of these guys out, I was in Vietnam, and somebody back home said that they wanted to have these mugs made out of brass cannon shells, and that they were being made in nationalist China, and that some of them had already been made, and could I go pick them up? So, yeah, sure, I'd go pick them up. So I went to their base up there, and I met these guys. Some of them I hadn't seen for years since I'd flown with them. And I got my cannon shells. They cut them in like a beer mug, you know, cut them about this high.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't 2 feet, 3 feet long. They were just about like this with handles on both sides and engraved with your name and so forth on the side of it. So I picked these things up, and I had a big old bag full of them. I took back to Vietnam, and I went out with these guys at night, and they just showed me all over Taiwan, and it was a lot of fun. A lot of fun seeing them again. And the funniest thing about that whole trip was I woke up in the middle of the night, and I looked up at my watch, and I didn't know it, but I had put it on upside down. It was an expanding band, and I just shoved it on my arm and didn't think about it. I looked at my watch and says, oh my gosh, I got to be at the airport in about an hour. So I jumped in my clothes, and I ran downstairs as fast as I could go, and there was nothing going on. There was not a soul around. It was still in the middle of the night. So I finally got myself collected and got my watch turned around and put back on the right way, and found out that I was upside down. And so I went on back out to the air base and got my flight back to Vietnam. That was funny. I'd forgotten about that. Yeah, and then so I stayed on until just about the end, you know, and when it looked like we were just almost out of airplanes, so I left.
But the YouTube program is still strong.
They made 38 brand new U-2s about a year and a half ago and hired 80 pilots. Blew my mind, and everybody else's that was in it in the old days. You know, you couldn't imagine something like that. Yeah, they built 38 brand new U-2s. So the guys are getting a lot of flying time now. They're flying over Afghanistan and Iraq and Iran and all over the Middle East and everywhere else. You pick up a headline and the U-2 will probably be there within 24 hours. There was some big international thing going on. It was always that way, though. Yeah. We took I went on different TDYs with the U-2, went to, Alaska. Alaska was our first one. You went on that one.
Mm-hmm.
And Panama, and Australia, and God, where else we go? Can't remember right now. Well, we flew it all over the world. Oh, in Vietnam. I probably did 3 tours in Vietnam with the U-2. That got to be our big thing, and we kind of laid back on going to some of the other places unless somebody would pop off a nuke. And if somebody would pop off a nuke, then they would get the U-2 guys together, and we'd go there and start sampling, trying to get a reading on what was in that bomb. We had equipment on board the airplane that we could put on board the airplane in packages that would sample the air, and then we'd turn this over to the scientists, and they could figure out what was in the bomb and good stuff. I didn't get into that. That wasn't my business.
Well, sounds dangerous to fly through a nuclear cloud.
Well, we try to not fly exactly through them, but you know, if you get enough off to the sideway, and probably do. Once in a while, when we were in Alaska, the airplanes would come back so hot that they'd keep the pilot in the cockpit until they washed the airplane down with a fire hose. And of course, where's it go then? Down into the drain and off into the ocean somewhere. Or into a river. If we're at Eielson, of course, that was way, way inland. That was in Fairbanks. So that wasn't near the ocean at all. So all that radioactivity would get into the river somewhere. But yeah, sometimes those clouds are really, really hot. But I guess I did more tours in Vietnam than I did anywhere else with the U-2. Some people, you know, they'd get 1 or 2 to Alaska, and a couple to Panama and Buenos Aires and Australia and places like that. The one where we did Australia, that was an awful lot of fun because they speak the language for one thing, sort of. Better than many Americans do, unfortunately. But that was a good time in Australia. Went to see how they do horse racing and how they do their football games and things like that. That's really interesting.